Sir Patrick Stewart, you've got a barn burner of a series on Starz. You go over the top and have a wonderful career on Blunt Talk. Tell me how you came to become involved in the show.
Through Seth MacFarlane. I've worked with Seth for, I think, almost 12 years now on the animated series American Dad. And I'd already been watching Family Guy before I got called up, and I have a recurring character, Avery Bullock, who is the deputy director of the CIA. But that's the least of his characteristics. He has got many other interests besides working for the CIA. And we had so much fun. And about 2.5 years ago, Seth called me and suggested we have lunch. And he sat down and said, how would you feel about doing a live action half-hour comedy series? You done one of these before? And I've only to guest in them, I said. Things like Extras and Frasier, I had guested in. So given that the idea was coming from Seth MacFarlane, I was instantly enthusiastic about it. And the next good thing that happened was that he introduced me to Jonathan Ames, because he was very enthusiastic about having Jonathan Ames as the principal writer and showrunner. As it happened, I had just recently read one of Jonathan's novels and liked it very much. And we met in a coffee shop on 6th Avenue in Brooklyn, which is where we both live, and went on meeting at sort of 2 weekly intervals, just throwing ideas around, getting to know one another, talking about ourselves and our own lives, because a lot of those stories and anecdotes actually found their way into the first season.
And so you helped develop the character. What specifically about Blunt do you like, and what do you not like?
Well, to begin with, I was excited by the fact that this was a newsman. He was a campaigning journalist with his own nightly cable news show, and was really interested in trying to analyze and discuss the important issues in the world. He also had a secondary mission, which was to make America an even better country than it is, because Walter thinks that he is the man that knows exactly what the United States needs. A little bit arrogant, perhaps, but it gave him an attitude on set, on camera, in his own show, Blunt Talk, that I think was a nice launch pad for the bulk of the series, which is dealing with Walter's private life, which you already know is somewhat chaotic and somewhat undesirable, and as are the private lives of his inner circle on the TV show. And it's this combination of serious, committed reporting coupled with the chaos and wildness and sometimes even illegality of the way that Walter lives.
That pilot episode is such a good introduction to that chaos you're talking about. We get to see him in action at the studio, but boy, you know everything an actor could do in an episode.
Yeah, well, it was most of it in the script, and I was responding to Jonathan Ames' brilliant writing. Jonathan Ames can take an ordinary sentence, an ordinary expression of a feeling or an idea, and because his vocabulary and use of vocabulary is so distinctive and unusual, all of our characters, even when they have something fairly inconsequential to say it in an interesting and character-revealing way. And it's one of the wonderful things of having a novelist as our writer, principal writer, is that he continually is looking to expand our knowledge of all of the characters, Walter in particular, so that every episode feels more like a chapter in a book rather than something which is complete in itself. Certainly, working on Blunt Talk, I got to do more things on camera that I had never done before, not even in a darkened room with the doors locked. And this time I was doing them in public. Certainly not a week went by when I wouldn't say to the crew, oh, by the way, I've never done this before. This is a first time. And this is what made a lot of it so much fun.
Is there anything they could write that you wouldn't work?
Using the toilet in a public bathroom, or whether he's attempting to have a new relationship with somebody who he thinks is single but turns out to be very, very much married, and in his search to find a happy existence, he gets himself into an awful lot of trouble.
Yes, he does. He has to wiggle out of a lot of scrapes over the course of these first episodes. Is there anything they could write that you would say, no, I'm not going to do that?
No, that has never happened in Blunt Talk. I think it's happened twice on American Dad, when one storyline came up and another one was a joke about somebody who happens to be a very good friend of mine. And I said, guys, I'm sorry, I don't think I can say this. And they were wonderful. They said, no problem, get rid of it. What do you want to say? Let's say something else. It's a very relaxed set. We are an ensemble, something that has always been really important to me all my acting career. As a young actor, when I joined my first theater company in 1959, my interest was in ensemble, working with a dedicated group of actors, directors, designers, and technicians, and working together for a long period of time. And indeed, that was perhaps the first 15 years of my career, because having worked in regional theater, and when I say worked in, I mean for a whole year or 2 years or longer. And then I joined the Royal Shakespeare Company and went nowhere else for perhaps the next 10 or 11 years. So I was working with permanent groups of actors, 2 young actors who joined the Royal Shakespeare Company at the same time that I did, who actually were joining to do background work. They didn't have any dialogue at all, were Sir Ben Kingsley and the late Roger Rees, who grew as leading actors through their work as an ensemble and through being in the same rehearsal room with very mature, very experienced, brilliant actors. So I was always drawn to the idea of having a group who you work with whom you work every day, and that you create the program, the show together. And this has been exactly the experience with Blunt Talk.
Some of my favorite scenes are when you're all in the meeting room, or you're all in the studio, or doing something together. Those are very well played.
From the beginning, knowing that we were going to have some fairly crazy scenes in the series, and there would be a lot of comedy and a certain amount of physical comedy, the one thing that I continually talked with Jonathan Ames about was that fundamentally we should be intent on creating a very serious news program. So we have already in the first season dealt with issues of female genital mutilation, of PTSD, of global warming, of the problems of returning veteran soldiers, and with that base of strong, serious journalism, the craziness grows out of that. And I never wanted us to lose sight, excuse me, of Walter's intention, which was to create a better world through his journalism. He instead makes a chaotic world for his own life and those of his family and colleagues. But his ultimate objective is to leave the world a better place for him having been in it.
One moment I want to ask you about, I believe it was the second episode, opens with the black and white musical sequence, or maybe it was toward the end of the first. I can't remember exactly where along the way. You look like you were having the time of your life doing that, and maybe if you'd been born 2 or 3 decades earlier, maybe that would have been, you would have been in those black and white or Hollywood musicals.
A new career, well, yes, who knows? and it's never too late. We started working on that dance sequence about 2 weeks before we began filming, because we were going to film it in the second week of production. It was actually the opening scene of episode 2, when at the end of episode 1, we've seen Walter unconscious, passed out on the studio floor while he was broadcasting live, passed out because he has taken, by mistake, a number of Ambien sleeping pills, which have made it difficult for him to stay upright. And I loved every moment of those dance rehearsals. Unfortunately, the dance sequence was cut down a little bit for the episode, as things often are. But working with a dozen brilliantly clever and beautiful Hollywood dancers was, I have to admit, the experience of a lifetime.
Well, maybe we'll get to see the extended version of that on the DVD that comes out.
Yeah, on the extra material. But of course, you have to remember that that was a dream sequence. So Walter actually isn't really a dancer.
Right. It's in his imagination. Second season, what are you working on a second season already?
This is a timely conversation, because tonight, Jonathan Ames, our principal writer, executive producer, and showrunner, and Tristram Shapiro, also one of our executive producers and our leading director. Tristram directed 4 of the 10 episodes last season. We are meeting when I'm going to hear for the first time Jonathan's ideas for the second season. I've heard a little bit about them. There's going to be one overriding political aspect to his journalistic work, but which will affect every other aspect of the show, because it's very, very controversial. It's too early to discuss what that campaign is really about, but it's going to be very overtly political, and I think the plan is, I will be able to tell you much more tomorrow, that this campaign will link together all the 10 episodes of the second season.
Well, that'd be perfect timing, because that would be like summertime of 2016 airing, right when the presidential races and all are heating up.
Well, how much we shall be referring to that, I personally would like to be much more involved with the presidential race, with the campaigning that's going on now. But given that our show will be airing just some months before the election actually occurs, and we start filming it in January, it's going to be a little bit problematic about making it as topical as we would like it to be. But everybody has the same intention, that we want this to be taken seriously as a truly important, serious, investigative news program.
You know, we're an awards website at Gold Derby, and we've got our Golden Globe predictions up and SAG Award predictions. You've been nominated at both of those several times. Those are the next couple of award shows coming up. I really feel like, you know, you and the show are going to do extremely well with the Hollywood Foreign Press. I bet this is kind of show that, as you're hearing from different people and different nationalities, that they're all liking it across the world. Is that correct?
Well, we have yet to be seen outside North America.
Okay.
The show is certainly going to be sold worldwide. And of course, my special interest is where it will be seen and how it will be seen in the UK, because, as you know, I have a home there, and the brilliant Adrian Scarborough, who plays Walter's manservant, valet and chef and masseur, and multiple roles he has. Dolly Wells, of course, is a brilliant English actress, and Tristram Shapiro, our executive producer, is also British. So we have a vested interest of getting that on British television as soon as possible. The response to the show from viewers has been really satisfying. They are enjoying it. There are a lot of comments about seeing Patrick Stewart doing things that you're unaccustomed to seeing him do. And I've certainly been enjoying that aspect of the character. But, well, we would love it if we were, if we got some thumbs up from the awards that are coming up. It's always an exciting time. And having not worked on American television for quite a number of years, this is something that I'm especially looking forward to.
One award or recognition I definitely wanted to ask you about. In 2010, you were knighted by the Queen. Tell us just, first of all, how do you find out about something like that? And secondly, in that moment that you find out, what's the reaction?
Well, I'll try and make this story as short as possible. I had gone on location in somewhere in a rather unattractive part of the Midlands of England to film the stage production of Macbeth, which we were now going to film on location. And we were living in a really rather uncomfortable and not very pleasant motel. And when I'd arrived there a couple of weeks earlier, I'd had a bag full of mail and I put it in a closet, planning to have a look at it when I got a break. And found it there 2 weeks later, unopened, and oh Lord, I didn't know what was in there. So very early, 5:30 in the morning, I hauled it all out, and there was this envelope with Cabinet Office written on the outside, and I had no idea what it was, none at all. Opened it up and found that I was reading a letter telling me that I had been offered the award of a knighthood if I should choose to accept it. It's really rather ordinary, but there actually are two boxes that you can tick: accept and do not accept, because some people turn them down. I was amazed. It was completely unexpected, but it gave me, and continues to give me, very, very great pleasure. I know people say to me, "Come on, Patrick, you're on the left wing of politics in England. How could you possibly accept a knighthood?" Well, there was no doubt in my mind that in accepting this, or services to the acting profession, that I was taking it on behalf of all of my colleagues, the many, many hundreds of wonderful and hardworking actors that I've worked with over the years. And it was very pleasant to join the company that includes Ian McKellen and Sean Connery and Michael Caine and Derek Jacobi. So it's something that I can only say I'm very, very proud of.
Speaking of your fellow actors, I should have asked you this before, but are you a voting member on the Academy, on the Oscars?
I am a member of the Academy, yes. And under rather unusual circumstances, I've been filming in Australia a new version of Moby Dick, and Gregory Peck, the late Gregory Peck, had invited himself into the production. He wanted to play the role of Father Mapple. There were very personal reasons, which perhaps I shouldn't go into, why he wanted to play the role played by Orson Welles in the film where he played Ahab. And we flew back to Los Angeles together, and on the plane we were talking about the upcoming Academy Awards, and he said, "Of course you're a voting member." And I said, no, actually I'm not. And he said, "Oh my Lord, well, we must do something about that." And some weeks later I got a phone call from him saying, "Patrick, the Academy has accepted your membership. I was the one who proposed you, and it may interest you to know that you were seconded by Kirk Douglas." Well, from my childhood, these two actors had been such heroes of mine for all the work that they did. And it was unimaginable to think that these two great men, and delightful men too, had proposed and seconded me to be a member of the Academy, which I also have to say gives me great pride and pleasure.
Boy, you couldn't ask for two better people to accept you, to vote you in.
I know, isn't that amazing? It's very exciting.
Well, reason I asked is often when I have an Academy voter on for a discussion, I like to ask toward the end of the conversation, just, I know you take that very serious. I'm sure you do. So when you've got that nominating ballot, or you've got the final ballot for voting for winners, and you don't have to give specifics if you don't want, but just what rolls through your mind? What kind of performances generally make you want to vote for them?
I've always had this little private theory that, as in competitive diving, that is, highboard diving and springboard diving. Dependent on the dive that a diver chooses to do, there are attachments called degrees of difficulty. So if you attempt a very difficult dive, you get a percentage higher mark than you might for an easier dive. And when I'm watching films at this time of the year, what is often very much in my mind is the degree of difficulty of the individual work that an actor or actress is doing. I know what it feels like to be really challenged by a role. I know what it feels like just to have a role that comes easily and is great fun. But sometimes, you see an actor performing miracles with a role that was very, very challenging. It can be physically challenging or psychologically challenging or just very, very uncomfortable. And I always take those considerations into account when I'm watching a movie. I mean, for example, I'll give you an instance because he's my dear friend and I shall be voting for him. Ian McKellen in his movie Mr. Holmes has to play Sherlock Holmes at 2 ages. I think that's 69 and 93 or 92. Very, very challenging. Easier to play a difference in roles between 19 and 30, but at that age, it's very, very challenging. And I'm so impressed by how Ian McKellen so brilliantly conveys this difference in ages. And that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about.
I just saw that this week, and so much with just little moments and eyes and when he walks and things. It's very, very, very good.
Yes.
Speaking of movies, as we finish up here, you got a couple, one Match for this year and then Green Room for next year. Can you give us just a little bit of information about those two?
Well, yes, Match is a contender this year. It had a quite small release here in the United States and worldwide, but was critically very, very well received. It was a very modest film. We actually shot it in 15 working days because it was largely in an apartment on the north end of the tip of Manhattan and involved really only 3 characters. My 2 colleagues were brilliantly part of the production, Carla Gugino and Matthew Lillard. The 3 of us shared the film together, and I'm very proud of all the work that went into that film. The direction, the writing is very interesting, and the performances. But in April, I have a movie opening called Green Room. Jeremy Saulnier's sequel. Well, it's not a sequel exactly to the movie, but he had a lot of significant success with a film called Blue Ruin about 2 years ago. And it's a sort of genre movie. It's a horror movie, but there are no zombies, there are no Walking Dead. They're just very real people. And people find themselves in terrifying situations. And I'm really pleased and hopeful that this movie will do well.
Some of those, if they're very real situations, those could be more horrific than a horror movie where you suspend disbelief.
They can. The film that I always thought of when we were making Green Room October, November last year in Oregon was John Boorman's brilliant film Deliverance, where kind of innocent townies get caught up in a situation in a wild part of the American countryside, which is, it's when you come face to face with people with whom you cannot reason. You can't say, look, let's just sit down, have a cup of coffee and talk this over. That's not a solution to the crisis that those guys, brilliant guys in Deliverance, found themselves in, or our poor victims in Green Room, because I am on the other side this time. I am playing the leader of the bad guys, who is a white supremacist, but a white supremacist with a serious problem that he has to resolve, and that might mean hurting a lot of people.
Well, good luck with both of those. And Blood Talk, I just really feel like this is going to be something that we're going to see you at a couple of these award shows coming up soon.
Oh, thank you. That would be very, very nice to experience.
Well, thanks for your time today. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.